In the case of the Shebley family, they simply requested some clarification regarding the security measures for their child that needed an extra extension belt for their booster seat, and as a result they were removed for no other reason but asking a question of security and safety for their own family member. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Phil Robertson, who will begin to talk to you about the details of the case, then we'll hear from Maria Muzaffar. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. If we remember back about a year ago, we were all preparing to go on spring break vacation. That was actually the start of the problems for the Shebleys. Unfortunately, they did not realize it at the time when they decided to board the plane of United Flight 5811 to Washington, D.C. Their problems began as soon as they were on the plane. They were simply asking for clarification on whether or not to have a booster seat or a shoulder harness for their children as they were traveling on the plane. Instead of getting a response and a responsive response, they were met with hostility and arbitrary and unreasonable reaction by the personnel on the plane, as well as the airline pilot and the other members of the airline staff. What we're hoping to see today is some measure of justice being brought to the Shebley family for these grievances that occurred to them almost a year ago today. We have been looking at this issue for many months. We see it exacerbating now with the new Trump administration. We expect that these incidents are going to become more common as they have been over the past year. And so we believe the time is right now to bring this to the attention of the courts and the federal government and ask for some accountability on behalf of the airlines. That's really what this suit is about. We're looking for some measure of accountability for the airlines to respond and respond responsibly by setting up a system by which individuals who are in these types of scenarios, who do not present any type of risk to passengers or the flight itself, to be able to provide a clear and concise set of criteria and guidelines for individuals who may be in this situation but are clearly not presenting any sort of danger or threat to the other passengers or the plane itself or the flight itself. So we brought the complaint today pursuant to 3 federal statutes. There are 3 federal claims that we hope to, and we will be proceeding forward on. And the most important thing that we hope to get out of this is some guidance from the court with respect to how to deal with these types of situations. I think airlines have for a while been operating in the realm of unfettered discretion, and I think that they have taken that opportunity to stretch the limits of what their ability is, and the ultimate result, the end result, is the targeting of law-abiding Muslims who are airline passengers throughout the country. We hope to abate this process, and we hope that this lawsuit will go a long way in getting that discussion moving forward and bringing some responsibility and accountability back to the airlines.
I got it. All right. Good morning. As Phil had explained, that we are experiencing, I'm sorry?
Name and spelling.
Oh, sorry. Maria Muzaffar, M-A-A-R-I-A, last name M-O-Z-A-F-F-A-R. So as Phil had explained, that we are actually seeing a rise of individuals being asked to leave airplanes when they are of Muslim or Arab descent. And as Phil went into the details of the lawsuit, you'll see in the lawsuit itself, there are 3 counts that we are filing for. But I want to have you really focus your attention on the bigger picture of what we're trying to chip away here. In general, the public accommodation cases in this country, case law, is to protect individuals from discrimination based on religion and ethnicity for places that are open to the public, right? So you have movie theaters, you have restaurants, and now what we see is that lots of individuals are taking long airline flights. They are in an environment where they are surrounded by individuals much like a restaurant or much like a community, much like a music place, or sorry, a movie theater. And in that process, there is an interaction between passengers and the staff, the crew, the pilot, and the passenger themselves. So what has happened, because there's an absence of authority, an absence of explanation of how do these airlines and passengers protect themselves from discrimination, we have seen airlines not have to follow any rules. Now, as you know, that pilots have a broad discretion. They are responsible to make sure that passengers are safe, that instructions are given clearly, that passengers have questions resolved before they take off and during the flight, and that also is true for the airline staff. In this specific case, as Phil stated, there were a few questions, there was a back and forth discussion, but there wasn't a clear conversation of what was to take place. The Shebley family was made to feel targeted. The wife wears a hijab. The husband is of Middle Eastern descent. And in fact, in the process of this specific scenario, they were actually following proper instructions. So what we saw here is that the staff and the pilot, with their inherent bias, basically asked them to leave the plane. Despite the fact that they never not followed any directions, they were not a threat to any of the other passengers, and in fact, all the other passengers in the plane around them were supporting them. So what we're seeing here is, as you probably would coin the term yourself, flying while Muslim. It's not a new phenomenon for minorities. But the fact is, under this administration, if you do not have guidelines of how private employees and public employees and private employees who actually provide a pretty much long-term public service, how are they supposed to conduct themselves when they're dealing with individuals with diversity? And I also want to say inherent bias, and you'll see this in the lawsuit, inherent bias can only be proved by intentional action. In this case, the intentional action was that the pilot came to the family and asked them to deboard the plane. When he asked them to deboard the plane, he said, "You're not following instructions." But they did. Nobody else was asked to deboard the plane. Nobody else was asked questions. Nobody else was in a discussion asking for more safety precautions like this family was. So this is a point, I think, in time with the new administration that we want to make sure that minorities are protected while they are watching movies, while they're eating in restaurants, and while they're flying and driving. Specifically in this case, long travel or in flight. Once we do that, then we can start tackling the problem of isolating minorities and isolating targeted groups, which is why the Civil Rights Act was created, in daily life. And I guess we'll open for questions.
I'll just add, let me just add one thing. Before we open for questions, I just wanted to add that this experience is not without consequence for the actual family in question. This isn't simply a technical issue. This is somebody, a family of 5, that were flying to try to unwind after a year's long hard work. They wanted to have a good time, they wanted to relax. Instead, they were humiliated, they felt intimidated, they felt singled out, they had to take all of their belongings down. And you know, when you have 3 children, I have 2 of my own, and you're traveling with that large party, it's very difficult just to settle down and finally you're happy that you're in your seats and you're ready to go somewhere. And they had to take everything back down again, carry their children, walk through the aisle between all the passengers that were looking at them, and then without any explanation, without any any detail as to why they would be leaving, And on top of that, their vacation was ruined. They felt the emotional distress as a result. They couldn't go back to work immediately. Their work suffered as a result of that experience. And we tried to negotiate with United before the lawsuit took place to try to bring justice to the table outside of court, and that did not go anywhere. And so we were left with this one option to pursue justice through this lawsuit, as the system dictates. They're not here. They're not here today. Yeah.
You mentioned
No, they're not.
You mentioned that they couldn't enjoy their vacation. You did say in the complaint that United put them on another flight right away. So they did continue.
Yes.
Whether or not they enjoyed it.
Yes. The family, after the initial media attention, the family really, they're not made for public, sort of appearances. They never signed up to be spokespersons of anything. They're not comfortable in the public limelight, so they really did not want to repeat that experience, bring undue attention to themselves and their children by having their faces blasted on cameras on the airwaves. So they opted to have us represent them in this press conference without making an appearance themselves.
It's a little difficult for us to tell their story without them.
And we explained that, and they just did not feel comfortable coming to the press conference. Yeah.
Really tell their story without hearing them talk about the pain with parties.
Yeah. Well, we do represent the family, and this is a lawsuit, and this is the official representation of the clients in the lawsuit. So we'd be happy to answer any questions on their behalf.
Can you talk about the difference between the lawsuit that was filed against American Airlines and this lawsuit, and how they're different, and then why the time, we'll talk about the time lag, because if indeed they did get on another flight, are we talking monetary damages, and they lost wages? And what are you looking, obviously you're looking for a definite, a clarification of policy, I get that. Mm-hmm. But are they looking for some money, are they looking for, what is the end game here? Mm-hmm.
Certainly there are damages to the family. We will be able to quantify those during the course of the litigation. That's what we have discovery for. The damages, though, are more than just monetary damages. They're damages to their reputation, to their good name, to their emotional stability. There's probably going to be, if there isn't already, some memory and perhaps some mental or emotional memory in the minds of the children who experienced this horrific event as it unfolded on United's flight. So the damages portion are not just declaratory relief or injunctive relief. There are monetary damages as well, and we also did seek punitive damages against each of the airlines in each of the counts.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. One, you mentioned that your concerns about discrimination during the Trump administration. This happened a year ago before Trump got in office, so how do you...
Right. My commentary before was that we have seen a number of these incidents happen over the past year during 2016. We've seen more instances of hate crimes, etc., since the Trump administration has begun. We anticipate that we are going to have many more travel issues during this current administration, as we've been seeing as a result of the executive orders that have been administered already. We believe the time is right now to bring this, because we believe that with all of these issues coming up and with the new administration in place, this is the best time to bring this out for public attention, for public discussion, and to have the courts give some guidance to the airlines on that issue.
My second question is guidelines. Give me a little bit more of an example. You mentioned that
Sure.
you would like to see the airlines and other companies have some kind of rule set in place. What kind of guidelines are you looking for, would you suggest?
What we're looking for is something that is a little less amorphous than simply giving unfettered discretion to the airline staff to make a subjective decision about when someone poses a threat to the safety and security of the other passengers and the flight itself. We're looking for some specific guidelines that say how to evaluate those situations from a protocol standpoint. And there are a number of airlines that, from what we've heard, handle things slightly differently. We've been informed that some airlines take that decision on the aircraft and then move it to a third party who is a disinterested third party to make a decision about whether that person gets removed. That's not every airline, but that's some airlines. Most airlines leave the decision in the discretion of the pilot and the airline personnel.
But the person, that third party coming in, sounds like you end up with the same thing. That person is now off the
Except the person that you would have as the decision maker would be a third party disinterested person, not there in the middle of the situation.
Presumably you're talking about the police.
No, actually it can be, what we had heard is another airline uses a system by which the pilot radios down to the control tower. There's someone in the control tower that makes that decision. Not the pilot and not the personnel who are dealing with the individual.
immediately so that the person...
As far as I know, yeah. And again, this is what we have heard. We don't know if that's true, but it would be an example of something that we would like to see implemented on a more wide-scale basis so that these decisions aren't made on an ad hoc basis by someone who might have some sort of bias against otherwise law-abiding Muslim citizens.
Let me just add something to clarify. So before we can talk about the solution, we need to understand the problem. Imagine if you're sitting as you are right now in your seats and you've done nothing at all. You're simply looking on your phone on a video clip, a CNN clip, and somebody comes along and says, excuse me, you need to deboard this plane. Pick up your bags, go through the walk of shame through the aisle and exit the plane. Right now as things stand, should that happen to any of you, there is zero recourse for you given the current set of regulations and the current standards of the airlines. Now, as far as a solution, we believe it is the responsibility of the airline to come up with the proper guidelines and solutions, working with federal regulations to ensure that their passengers don't face this kind of arbitrary subjective discrimination should somebody will it. And that this person could think that they're acting appropriately, or they could actually have ill intent. And there's no way for us to be able to make that determination without having a proper guideline system in place.
Having said that, could this have been a case of mistaken, miscommunication and not inherent bias?
This was caught on video. It was very clear in the video, as well as in the witness of our clients, that they were very clear and concise in communicating that they were following orders. There was nothing to suggest that they weren't. The only thing that they did was to ask a question to which the response should have been an answer, a clarification. Once they got that clarification, they would have continued to follow orders. Even though they didn't, they still removed the booster seat. Even without receiving a response, they still complied with the original order.
So what kind of numbers do you have?
I'm sorry?
What kind of numbers do you have? You said you've seen an increase. Have you surveyed the community? Do you have any numbers that show since in the last year there have been...
In the last year and a half, we're aware of at least a dozen cases around the country that are similar in nature, ranging from speaking Arabic, looking, wearing a hijab or having a beard, or looking Muslim and having a passenger be scared about that, watching something on your phone that anybody might be watching, like a CNN clip, so on and so forth.
Was it 0 before or something, or 2 before, 3 before, compared to...
We didn't do any surveys before, but when a problem begins to arise, you begin to look at the data. But presumably it happened before, but it wasn't to a degree where it caught our attention and the public's attention as it has in recent months and years. And back to the Trump issue, while the Trump administration was not yet in power, the rhetoric surrounding the campaign and coming out of the campaign was already there and was affecting how people in Main Street and in certain elements of corporate life were beginning to perceive Muslims. Now, we're not making a claim that this is to be blamed on Trump, whether it's his administration or his campaign. He's not, party to this lawsuit. But that general context, whether Trump or not, is important. The context of Islamophobia, of demonizing Muslims, of scapegoating Muslims in the media, which has happened well before Trump as well.
You said that was on video. Who shot
Yes.
the video?
Can you share the video with us?
They shoot it?
They shot it themselves, and
It's in the press release. There's a link to the video in the press release that we sent out. So the wife filmed it.
So, and what is that, there's a link to the, I'll probably ask you to shoot me that press release.
Okay.
because I don't have it.
That's fine.
But just what does it show? What in that clip?
It shows specifically what we reference in our complaint, which is the facts showing that.
yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
someone could like, thank you, sir.
The video shows what we've alleged in our complaint, which is basically that this was a very simple situation which could have been handled diplomatically and responsibly by the airline personnel, but was not. What it shows is that the Shebleys, who were simply trying to get clarification on a point about their child traveling, were instead met with hostility. They asked many questions. They asked, why are we being asked to leave the plane? They were never given a clear answer on that. They were never given any type of explanation at all. There are witnesses on the plane who can attest to the fact that the Shebleys not only followed instructions, but were very polite, and were trying to just simply get an answer to their question. So the video, as you will see, essentially confirms what we've alleged in our complaint, and we believe that that will show that there was clear discrimination in this case.
I have a couple questions. Could you peel back the veil a little bit on the negotiations and what was the family
We cannot. No.
seeking?
Due to rules of professional conduct, we're really not allowed to discuss negotiations.
And when did the negotiations end?
The negotiations ended last fall.
And can you talk a little bit about whose authority it would fall under to come up with guidelines? Would that be up to the courts or the company?
No, as Ahmed mentioned, we believe that that falls squarely on the airlines to do that. That is the airline's responsibility to come up with those guidelines. They have not done so. This has been an issue for many years, from what we can tell from the case law that has existed before, and yet the airlines have not stepped up to the plate and taken care of this. But we're here now to make sure that they do that.
So you're asking the court to instruct United Airlines to come up with guidelines?
To come up with guidelines to establish criteria that will help in these types of situations.
And what about other airlines where these incidents?
They may or may not also follow suit, and we're hoping that they do. We're hoping that this is an industry-wide change.
You mentioned that the families suffered in terms of their job and mentally. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What do you mean, how and why did they suffer because of this incident?
With respect to their suffering, the trip itself was obviously very traumatic for their children. Since that time, their children have had some issues with traveling. They have traveled since then, so they haven't been not getting on planes, but there are issues with the children, even to this day, almost a year later. Mother Iman did lose time while she was working. She is a CPA, and she lost time working because of this incident.
Why? I mean,
Let me answer.
Yep.
I mean,
you say the children, what, they
yeah, I'll just add something.
They didn't go to work because they were traumatized or what? What was the impact?
It was a traumatizing experience for them. It took a while for them to be able to get on flights again, even though they need to for their work. It took a while for them to be able to go on vacation again, even though they need that time off to unwind. And when they did, the children were very apprehensive and they were very uncomfortable. It had an effect on how they perceive themselves in society. They were people who felt that they belonged. They're upright, law-abiding citizens in their communities. They're both wonderful people if you get to meet them, very nice, very kind, very humble people. They're philanthropists, they help out, they volunteer. So their world was shook, and they started to feel that they're like second-rate citizens, that anything can happen to them at any time, that the arbitrary nature of what happened can be repeated. And that feeling keeps you on edge, and it changes your life, your daily life, and how you perceive yourself. Even in situations where that might not happen, in a traffic stop or somebody side-eyeing you in the streets and they don't have any intentions to have any ill intent towards you, you begin to perceive your world differently. So that single incident really transformed them in those very terrible ways.
I just want to add to that, I think, and I don't think I need to put on this mic, but I just want to add to that the idea of being seen as an outsider when you're on the inside and you're traveling in a benign, way, and you're dealing with passengers and pilots and staff very respectfully, that demoralizing feeling, I would really challenge when the target is to those individuals to just develop a thick skin. That's not the type of society, and that's not the type of community and responsibility that we want to put on companies and passengers when there actually is paid passengers here, right? Dignity and the respect of dignity as passengers, as human beings, as consumers needs to go full circle. And this is an example. Their absence is an example of this, This is a mother who actually had their young boy start crying when this happened. He actually started crying, and he understood very clearly what was going on, that they were made to feel that they did something wrong. And so when you feel as a young child that you are an offender when your family and yourself is not, it does force you to go inward a little bit, and that's a challenge for parents, and that's a challenge for children. And I would say their absence speaks louder, to be honest with you, that they are now in this position where they don't want all that attention, they just want the problem solved. They want this not to happen to any other family, and they want to feel that they are equal parts of this society, which they are.
You had mentioned that one of the parents, or both perhaps, as they work, missed flights. Since then, as a result of this poor work, how many flights did they miss?
Did they miss one?
I'm assuming from the trauma.
We know that there were issues. We don't have a specific number on that.
But that kind of
they
detail,
didn't miss flights? Like as a result of,
it's not missing. It's,
or not
in order for them to do their jobs and to run their family in the optimum way that they would like to do and they have a right to do, they need to get on flights. And there were some of these flights that they normally would take for conferences, for vacation, etc., that they didn't feel comfortable getting on. And even the ones that they did end up taking, they felt extremely uncomfortable being on. So it was this burden that was added to their regular life that didn't exist before as a result of this incident.
I'm just curious, you mentioned like missed conferences. How many did
numbers and details would start to come out in the lawsuit. There would not be an announcement today. Any other questions? I'll conclude by saying that the consequence. I'm sorry?
I was just going to add one more point. The other point that I wanted to make before we adjourn is that this is not a situation where we had individuals who were in a position that it was clear that they posed a threat to someone's safety or the safety of other passengers or the flight itself. From the video, you'll see that this is a situation where people were trying to get clarification, just get a question answered. So it's not a situation where it was clearly a risk to anybody on the flight. You could see from the video that these are very well-intentioned, very well-meaning people, and they just simply wanted an answer to their question. So I just want to make sure that we have that distinction clear in our minds when we go forward. Thank you.
And just lastly, this affects more than the Shebley family, and not just this story, but other stories that have emerged in that same context. It affects our entire community. And if you were to follow the social media discussions, there is a real strong sense of apprehension every time one of these stories emerge. People start to think, can I speak Arabic in an airport? Arabic is just one of our beautiful global languages that exist in this world. Nobody should have to bite their tongue and start to feel as if they're committing a crime just because they need to communicate with their elderly mother or father-in-law while standing in line in an American airport. People are now second-guessing whether they can watch news clips while waiting for a long flight to actually take off. Again, that shouldn't be the case for free Americans living in America wanting to watch a video clip. And this is CNN we're talking about, or Al Jazeera. It was a mainstream media. It wasn't like they're watching, ISIS.com or something. So the reality of how thick fog this puts on our entire community also is a factor in us saying enough is enough. We need to stand up to this once and for all. And we're not pouring in all of these incidents into this lawsuit, but this lawsuit on its own stands on its merits, but is within that larger context, and that's how it should be understood. So with that, we'll conclude. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.